So ready doesn't really mean ready.
Or ready to get ready.
Recording in progress.
We are live, Your Honor.
Good evening. The special meeting of the City Council, please come to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. For those participating via Zoom, when we get to the item that you want to speak on, please use the raise your hand feature and the city clerk will turn on your microphone to speak at the appropriate time. Let the record show that all council members are present this evening. City Manager's report, Mr. Benoon.
Yes, good evening, Your Honor, members of the council. Tonight is a work session to discuss the upcoming 2022 through 2024 capital improvement plan. If the council may recall, the last time we visited this matter was a few months ago. Staff provided the council with a basic description of submitted projects. Since then, I'm happy to report that the city's executive team have gotten together, reviewed the proposed projects, discussed them at length with engineering staff. I thank Mr. Imai for leading us in those efforts, as well as the rest of the city's executive team for their work. Tonight, Mr. Imai will present the council with a draft and recommended capital improvement plan. More than interested in hearing council's comments and feedback. Any final drafts will be presented to the council for final incorporation in the city's budget come, I believe, June 23rd is when we anticipate holding the public hearing for adoption of the biennial budget and capital improvement plan. Tonight, our presentation will be segmented as a result of FPPC rules. So I believe we have 4 segments to address the potential conflicts as a result of real property interests. After we're done addressing those, then we'll proceed with the typical capital improvement plan presentation. Again, I thank Mr. Imai for his tremendous work in this matter, and I look forward to the presentation. Mr. Imai.
Thank you, City Manager Benoon. Good evening, Honorable Mayor and members of the Council. As City Manager Benoon mentioned, at the March 24th City Council meeting, staff provided an overview of the 2022-2024 Capital Improvement Plan, or CIP process. Available funding sources and anticipated funding amounts were also presented, along with a comprehensive list of projects submitted for consideration and funding with the 2022-2024 CIP. However, specific project funding recommendations were not provided at that time. Tonight's presentation of the 2022-2024 CIP will review the schedule for adoption of the CIP, review final CIP funding sources, present staff CIP project funding recommendations, and go over next steps. Now, the schedule for the CIP process began with a call for projects, which was distributed to all city departments back in November of last year. Tonight is step 6, with council's review and approval of the projects recommended for inclusion in the 2022-2024 CIP. Next, as City Manager Benoon mentioned, will be a biannual budget City Council work session scheduled for May 26th, and staff is then scheduled to bring the CIP document to the Planning Commission on June 14th for general plan conformity finding. And lastly, we plan to recommend formal City Council adoption of the CIP with the biannual budget on June 20th. So on to project funding. During the March 24th presentation, staff highlighted 4 general categories of funding sources. Funding for projects recommended for inclusion excuse me, in the 2022-2024 CIP can now be broken down into 5 general categories. Gas tax funds, capital funds, and park impact fees were previously discussed during the general overview in March. The anticipated balances shown here have not changed since the March 24th presentation. Additional funding sources for the 2022-2024 CIP include community service facility fees and the Community Development Maintenance Fund. The use of community service facilities fees is restricted to construction of new community service facilities identified in the 2017 Community Service Facilities Development Impact Fee Nexus Study. The previously approved Civic Center expenditure plan included the use of community service facility fees. After reconciliation of the Civic Center project budget, there will be a projected $854,000 of community service facility fees remaining. Now, community development maintenance funds may be used to pay for feasibility studies or master plans that are related to maintaining or updating the Newark General Plan, zoning ordinance, or other related regulations. The estimated fund balance for community development maintenance funds beginning July 1st, 2022 is approximately $4 million. Next, we will go over the projects recommended for inclusion with the 2022-2024 CIP. As City Manager Benoon mentioned, the city will be segmenting and first considering 4 separate project lists of the CIP in which various council members have real property and/or business interests, with council members recusing themselves as necessary. To determine which segmented project list of the CIP would be considered first, staff utilized a random means of selection to identify the order in which each project list would be considered. In this instance, the project list will be considered in the following order: Project List C, Project List B, Project List D, and finally Project List A. After each project list is considered and a final vote is taken, the City Council will then consider a project list composing the balance of the CIP as a whole. First up is Project List C, which includes the Lindsay Track Street and Storm Drain Improvements Project and a traffic signal interconnect project on Thornton Avenue between Sycamore Street and Cedar Boulevard.
Yes, ma'am. Okay.
As I own real property interests and business interests, which is a source of my income from the tortilla factory at 7015 Thornton Avenue and rental properties at 7155, 7167, and 7179 on Thornton Avenue, and another rental property at 36805 Magnolia Street that is in proximity to the Lindsay Track Street and Storm Drain Improvement Project and in proximity to the Thornton Avenue Traffic Signal Interconnect Project. Do I recuse myself for both of them right now?
No.
No? Okay.
Does anybody else have to recuse themselves on this item? Okay.
Okay. The design development continues on the Lindsay Track Street and Drainage Improvement Project, which was first funded in fiscal year 2019-2020 with $3.5 million of gas tax funds. Based on current estimates, an additional $1.5 million will be required to fully fund anticipated construction costs for the project. This is in addition to the funds that would be received through property owner participation and support through the formation of an assessment district. The traffic signal interconnect project on Thornton Avenue between Sycamore Street and Cedar Boulevard is currently included in the CIP as an unfunded project with an assigned priority level 3 and an estimated cost of $150,000. The project would install the necessary infrastructure, hardware, and software needed to coordinate the traffic signal timings along this segment of Thornton Avenue, improving traffic flow during peak periods. Staff recommends that the Lindsay Track Street and Drainage Improvement projects remain in the CIP as a funded project with an additional funding of $1.5 million of gas tax revenue for a total funded amount of $5 million. An additional $500,000 of gas tax funds would be allocated to the project in fiscal year 2022-2023, and the remaining $1 million of gas tax funds would be allocated to the project in fiscal year 2023-2024. Staff also recommends that the traffic signal interconnect project on Thornton Avenue be included in the CIP as a funded project with a budget of $150,000 using anticipated gas tax revenue for fiscal year 2022-2023. The staff has prepared a resolution summarizing these recommendations and approving the inclusion of Project List C in the 2022-2024 CIP for final adoption with the biannual budget. If council agrees, staff recommends approval of the resolution approving Project List C as presented.
Okay, does that complete
That completes
Number C?
staff's presentation for Project List C.
okay. So then let me ask at this time, would anybody in the audience like to speak on Project List C? Anybody in the audience on Project List C? Nope. Okay, City Clerk Harrington, are there any requests to speak online?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Then council member comments on project list C. Councilmember Bucci?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick question. The additional 1.5 for the Lindsay track, since this was already in a funded project, is this additional to make it completely funded, or is this additional because we've ran into some unforeseen costs as we've kind of started looking at it closer, or does this have to do with maybe the increase of just the cost of materials and other things before we get to it?
All of the above. So once we are in the thick of designing, developing the design for the Lindsay Tract project, and based on the current construction cost estimate, we're short. The project budget is short $1.5 million to fully fund the construction of the project. So the $1.5 million is in addition to the original $3 million that was budgeted for the project to make us whole for the anticipated cost of construction.
In a perfect world, if this goes through and gets approved and is fully funded, when would we anticipate seeing possible RFQs or things going out for this project?
RFQs are bids. It would actually be a bid. Okay. So first, we would be reaching out. We anticipate going out to the community soon for a public outreach for the formation of the assessment district. So we would want to know the results of the assessment district prior to going out to bid because, again, the $5 million total does not include the money that would be needed for the that we anticipate from the assessment district. So we would need to know whether assessment district is approved first prior to going out to bid.
Last question, how much would we expect to be able to generate from the assessment district if it went through?
Good question. Preliminary calculations from our consultant are looking to recoup $2 million from the assessment district.
Okay. All right, very good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Other questions from other council members? Anybody? No? Okay, then do we have a motion to adopt the resolution?
Yes, Mayor, I'll make that motion. Unless, I'm sorry, did Mr. Bucci make that motion?
No, he didn't.
I
but
will second it.
There you go. Okay. Please vote. Motion passes, 4 ayes, 1 recused. Councilmember Collazo recused.
Resolution of the City Council of the City of Newark approving Project List C in the Capital Improvement Plan for the City of Newark for fiscal years 2022, 2023, 2024 for final adoption with the biennial budget.
Poor mayor.
Okay, next is Project List B, which includes both the design and construction phases of the Old Town PDA Streetscape Improvement Project.
Okay. And we have recusals for this?
We do. Your Honor, I have to recuse myself once again.
Okay.
So I have real property interest and business interest in source of income for the Mexico Tortilla Factory at 7015 Thornton Avenue and rental properties at 7155, 7167, 7179 Thornton Avenue and a rental property at 36805 Magnolia Street in proximity to the Old Town PDA Streetscape Improvement Project.
Okay, you are recused.
Yes, Your Honor. Also, I have to be recused, so I have real property interest and business interest in the rental property at 37220 Magnolia Street in the proximity of the Old Town PDA Streetscape Improvements Project.
Okay.
Then there were 3.
And then we have the 3 poor council members.
Okay?
Okay.
Well, design development continues on the Old Town PDA Streetscape Improvements Project, which was first funded in fiscal year 2020, 2021 with $500,000 of gas tax funds. The construction phase of the project is currently included in the CIP as an unfunded project with an assigned priority level 3 and estimated costs of $6.5 million. Staff recommends that the design phase of the Old Town PDA Streetscape project remain in the CIP as a funded project, with construction phase, while the construction phase remain in the CIP as an unfunded project. Funding the design phase of this project separately has allowed the project design to be developed to a point where the city is better positioned to compete for outside grant funds for the construction phase, such as the recently announced and upcoming OBAG 3 funds. Staff has prepared a resolution summarizing these recommendations and approving the inclusion of Project List B in the 2022-2024 CIP for final adoption with the biannual budget. If Council agrees, staff recommends approval of the resolution approving Project List B as presented. And that concludes staff's presentation for Project List B.
Okay, is that complete? Okay. So at this time, I'd ask that, is anybody in the audience would like to speak on Project List B? Anybody? Project List B? Okay. City Clerk Harrington, are there any requests to speak online?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. And council member comments on Project List B? Okay. Vice Mayor Hannan?
Thank you for the report. Just a couple refreshing questions in my mind. The design, we've seen a completed design of the construction in the Old Town neighborhood. Haven't we seen that? We have not seen. When do you anticipate that that will come to council?
It's currently at the 30% design level. It's currently being designed. We wanted to get it to the 30% design level so that we could better, again, like I said, mentioned, better position ourselves for grant funds. But it's currently moving forward as well. So it could be done probably within the next year and a half, 2 years, something like that, depending on how a design progresses. But what you remembered seeing was it was a conceptual design. It was included in the Old Town specific plan. It was more of the, architectural, illustrative design.
One of the items that was identified in the construction phase is a archway sign, kind of recognizing the importance of Old Town to the city of Newark. And that would be part of that $6.5 million construction cost, would it not?
Correct.
At some point, though, this council could start to segment some of these construction costs if we wanted to do so. For example, if we wanted the archway pulled out of the total construction cost, we could do that. Do you have a sense as to what that portion of the construction might cost?
I don't have a construction estimate for the arch. However, I would like to point out that one of the main features of the streetscape project is a roadway diet, which means we're reducing the number of lanes from 4 to 3. We're including wider sidewalks, bulb outs at intersections, so the roadway pavement width is narrowing. So the arch is actually over the narrower section of the roadway. So the posts that support the arch, if we construct it now, it would be in the middle of the road.
Sure.
So it would be difficult to construct an arch now that would be compatible with the future streetscape improvement plans. And segmenting the project would be hard too, because you would have a road diet that chokes down and then comes back open to the regular 4 lanes. So staff's recommendation would be to build the project as a whole. We do agree that there would be some benefit to building an arch, but if you build the arch to span the entire roadway, then it would be too wide, basically, for when you create the wider sidewalks. Basically, the poles would be in the middle of the sidewalks then, or you would have to reconstruct the arch to narrow it.
Okay, and I agree with staff's recommendation in that regard. It doesn't make sense to spend money on an archway that would not meet the overall design and character of what we're trying to do in Old Town. Not asking for a specific date, and you may have mentioned this in your presentation, I didn't hear it. When would you hope that construction of the redesigning of Old Town might begin?
Currently, it's unfunded, so that depends on when we can secure funding. It is $6.5 million is the current estimate. Currently, we don't have that money allocated to the project. OBAG 3 call for projects just opened up last week. We are aggressively putting together application package to go after those funds. If we do secure the funds, it would accelerate construction and the project delivery.
You mentioned in your opening that we have roughly $5 million in our capital fund balance. As we look forward and into the future, there are certain projects, in my opinion, that warrant sooner construction than later construction. So as we continue to add money into the capital fund, I think it's important for staff to begin identifying those specific projects that, even though we don't have the money yet, these are ones that either the council or the community have identified as important. And so we need to make sure that we're setting aside sufficient funds in that capital fund balance to make sure that in the near future we have the funding available to actually complete the project. That would be my recommendation. Maybe next year, or when we look at the CIP in the future, we can kind of pinpoint some of those specific projects in terms of here's the dollars that it's going to take, and here's when we think we'll have those dollars accrued that we can begin construction. With those comments, Mayor, I'm happy to move this item.
Okay. Did Councilmember Bucci have any comments before?
Just a quick one. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm really happy to see staff going after the OBAG money, especially aggressively. It's been several years I've been trying to get our hands on some of that, and it's earmarked for us. It's just sitting there. So I think this is going to be a great use for that, and I'm really happy to see that we're pushing for this third round of funding. So thank you.
Okay. And there is a motion. Do we get a second?
Second.
Okay. Then please vote. Motion passes, 3 ayes, 2 recused. Councilmember Collazo and Councilmember Freitas recused.
Resolution of the City Council of the City of Newark approving Project List B in the capital plan for the City of Newark for fiscal year 2023 and 2023-2024 for final adoption of the biennial budget.
Thank you.
Okay, welcome back. Next is Project List D, which includes the city's Railroad Quiet Zone Study, the Safe Routes to School Improvement Project, and the Thornton Avenue Streetscape Project between Elm and Willow Streets.
Okay. And would anybody like to recuse himself on this item?
I'm looking, that looks like
Yeah,
it's
that's
me.
you. Democracy is so clumsy.
Real property on the project list, the real property interest in business rental property at 37220 Magnolia Street, 37082 Spruce Street, and 7968-7972 Thornton Avenue in proximity of the Railroad Quiet Zone Study Project. Real property interest and business interest in real property at 37082 Spruce Street and 7968-7972 Thornton Avenue in the proximity to Thornton Avenue Streetscape Project and Safe Routes to School Project.
Yeah.
I left the desserts on the table.
Bring some back.
You didn't bring any back?
It really is clumsy.
Okay.
Okay, Jason.
Well, the Railroad Quiet Zone Study was funded in fiscal year 2020-2021 with $100,000 of capital funds. The study is currently underway, and staff anticipates presenting the results of the Quiet Zone Study to council later this summer. Design development has also begun on the Safe Routes to School Improvement Project, which was funded in fiscal year 2021, 2022 with $250,000 of gas tax funds, including $43,000 of Measure BB discretionary funds as part of the Alameda County Transportation Commission's Safe Routes to School mini grant program. The project will seek to construct pedestrian safety improvements surrounding Schilling Elementary, Newark Junior High School, and the Birch Grove Primary and Intermediate Elementary Schools as funding allows. And Thornton Avenue Streetscape project between Elm and Willow Streets is currently included in the CIP as an unfunded project with an assigned priority level 3 and estimated cost of $1.2 million. Well, staff recommends that both the Railroad Quiet Zone Study and the Safe Routes to School Improvement Project remain in the CIP as funded projects. Staff also recommends that the Thornton Avenue Streetscape project between Elm and Willow Streets remain in the CIP as an unfunded project. The staff has prepared a resolution summarizing these recommendations and approving the inclusion of Project List D in the 2022-2024 CIP for final adoption with the biannual budget. If council agrees, staff recommends approval of the resolution approving Project List D as recommended. That concludes staff presentation on Project List D.
Okay, thank you. So again, would anybody in the audience like to speak on Project List D? Project List D, would anybody like to speak on that? Okay, Clerk Harrington, are there any requests to speak online?
There are not, Your Honor.
Okay. And under council comments, I would just ask on the Safe Routes to Schools implementation, what kind of improvements would we be looking for on the Safe Routes to Schools improvements?
So each of the schools identified in the list, there was a site safety assessment performed by the Alameda County Transportation Commission Safe Routes to School program. What we do is representatives or consultants hired by the Alameda County go down to the school. They partner with staff from engineering. They also partner with the principal and any concerned resident or parent of the school. And we basically walk the site during morning or afternoon pickup or drop-off times, and we identify safety concerns. And based on the observations of all the stakeholders involved in that assessment, the Alameda County's consultants come up with a site safety assessment plan, which identifies various improvements. So the improvements are higher visibility crosswalks, bulb outs, which is the curb extensions at the intersections, painting of restricting parking at certain areas to increase visibility of pedestrians, and better signage, so on and so forth. Curb ramps, kind of things, kind of generally in those areas.
Okay. So, for the last several years, the amount of automobile traffic in front of our schools has been increasing. And, you can say at most any of the K-6 schools, there's just an accident waiting to happen because there's so many cars at a condensed period of time. And with children being let off in front of the school, people making U-turns, people blocking the driveways. And I would like some consideration to be given to maybe a little bit more drastic improvements on these schools. Like, for instance, one I can think of offhand is in Bunker School, and most of the schools are like this, where they have space in between the street and the school. There's usually a driveway or something there that get all of that traffic off of the street and into a turnout, and then drop the kids off, and then go out, exit the turnout, and keep on going. Anyway, I have not seen anything like that, built in the Newark schools, and at least I'd like some consideration for that when we're looking at these improvements for the schools.
Yeah, that I do understand what you're talking about. It is difficult at every elementary school because the on-site drop-off and pickup is difficult. We do try to work with the principals. They understand it's a difficult operation, so how the coordination on how the circulation and the pickup and drop and staffing of those areas is very important. But a lot of the streets are narrower. I know I think it's shoot, I think it's music. I know people stack queue along the curb, and things. So it is tough, so that they try not to block, the adjacent traffic lanes. But it's a
Well, the
tough
music
situation.
problem's going to go away this year because,
Right.
or for the next school year because it'll be closed.
Right.
So,
But that's an example of where,
Yeah.
the cars will start to stack off the travel way to try and get out of this. But
Right.
it's a difficult situation. A lot of the newer, if brand-new schools, you would look to do like a pull-out for a drop-off area, but there's right-of-way along the street frontage is restricted in a lot of the school locations.
okay. Okay, other questions of staff on project list D? Vice Mayor Hannon?
Thank you. The schools that you mentioned, did you mention the Newark Junior High, since we're going to be increasing the enrollment there to include we're sixth graders are going to be going over there, or fifth graders, rather? Okay, sixth, thank you. I want to thank the community, and I'll certainly be corrected if I'm incorrect on this, but the railroad quiet zone really came up as part of a community priority. So I just want to, mention to our residents that we, the city, do take input on various issues around our city that they believe are important enough to be addressed. And the railroad quiet zone came up, I think, from the community. So I want to thank the community for bringing that to our attention. I want to thank staff for incorporating that in the funded projects. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Other comments? Councilmember Bucci?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick follow-up on the safe routes to schools. You mentioned that we will meet with county officials and schools and other folks and kind of walk the school before and after. Are we talking about just the immediate front or several blocks around, kind of
Yeah.
how far out do we go?
And that depends on, that's site-specific, so for each school, how far it reaches out. So we work with the principal, we work with the staff, say, hey, what's your typical route that you see children coming to school? So, if they identify that a lot of children cross at a crosswalk that's, a few hundred feet or a few hundred yards down the street, one person from the team will usually be posted on that. I remember at Schilling, I think there's a rear exit. There's a rear entrance too to that spot. We had one person posted at that entrance. So the way where we look is strategically formed based on a pre-discussion with the team members and especially with the principal or the staff members at the school.
Okay, I ask because it's a issue that's come up several times, and in the last few weeks again, is the crosswalk on Newark Boulevard at Russian. And I know we have a safety study and some other things going on right now, but should it be noticed in the Safer Schools? I mean, it just feels like it'd be another funding source to help kind of get those projects launched. So,
That is correct.
it certainly would, fits right next to where the junior high is. And then just, as someone who lives a mile away from the railroad tracks and is still woken up pretty regularly, I can't wait for the study to be completed. So, thank you.
Okay, other council member comments? Nobody? Okay. So then we need a motion to adopt a resolution approving project list D.
So moved.
Okay, is there a second? Second. Okay, please vote. Okay, motion passes, 4 yes, 1 recused, and that's Councilmember Freitas recusing.
Resolution of the City Council of the City of Newark approving project list D in the capital improvement for the City of Newark for fiscal years 2023 and 2023-24 for final adoption with the biennial budget.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, and lastly is project list A, which includes areas 1 through 4 of the Cedar Boulevard Linear Park.
Both of them won't take long.
Mayor, I need to recuse myself on this item because my primary residence is located in proximity of the Cedar Boulevard Linear Park project.
Okay.
Going to the highest bidder.
Okay.
All right. So construction of the planned Cedar Boulevard Linear Park is currently included in the CIP as 2 unfunded projects. The first includes areas 1, 3, and 4 of the Cedar Boulevard Linear Park with a total estimated cost of $2.87 million. Area 2, between Benton Court and Spruce Streets, comprises the second unfunded project with an estimated cost of $850,000. Both projects have been assigned a priority level 3 in the CIP. Now, as presented during the March 24th CIP overview, the city's current balance of park impact fees is approximately $3.6 million. In addition, based on the amount of anticipated residential construction, staff projects that an additional $4.3 million of park impact fees over the next 3 years will be realized. Staff recommends that Area 2 of the Cedar Boulevard Linear Park be included in the CIP as a funded project with a budget of $850,000 using park impact fee revenue for fiscal year 2022-2023. Area 2 of the Cedar Boulevard Linear Park between Benton Court and Spruce Streets is central to the overall planned park area, which spans from Haley Street to Bridgepoint Drive and will be easily accessible from either end via either Benton Court Street or Spruce Street. Staff also recommends that areas 1, 3, and 4 of the Cedar Boulevard Linear Park remain in the CIP as an unfunded project. Now, staff has prepared a resolution summarizing these recommendations and approving the inclusion of Project List A in the 2022-2024 CIP for final adoption with the biennial budget. If council agrees, staff recommends approval of the resolution approving Project List A as presented. And that concludes staff's presentation on Project List A.
Okay, thank you. So again, would anybody in the audience like to speak on Project List A? Anybody? Project List A? Okay, City Clerk Harrington, are there any online comments? No?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Then council member comments on Project List A. Councilmember Bucci?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Obviously, we have 2 broken out as a project, and 1, 3, and 4 are clumped up, but we can break those out later should we want to, and just try and tackle one at a time, obviously, correct?
Sure, that would be up to council's discretion.
Okay. If you'll indulge me for a second, I have a quick funny story. When I was 14 and on Christmas break, I had gotten my little 50 motorcycle running, and me and my buddy, because I grew up on the other side of where Cedar turns in right there, and me and one of my friends were riding up and down there through those dirt roads on the dirt bike, having the time of our lives, until the police pulled up on us. And I had my friend on the handlebars of a motorcycle, so obviously no helmets, we were in trouble. And I'll never forget it, right? They called my mom. I had to walk that thing home, and it was a less Merry Christmas because of it. But, I mean, we're talking 30 years ago, right? And it's still the same dirt road as it was when I got in trouble on the motorcycle over there. So to finally see this kind of becoming funded is it's a big deal. This is a huge project, and those areas back there have been kind of forgotten about for a while now. So I'm certainly happy to see this hit the list, and if there's no other comments, I'm happy to move it.
Okay, other comments?
I have a question.
Councilmember Collazo.
So if we're funding this Area 2, is this going to be a park where they're going to be able to drive through from one end to the other, or is it just walkable?
Yeah, I do have a picture photo. So this is from the Parks Master Plan, Citywide Parks Master Plan. So the park will not be drivable, but there will be walking and bicycle paths that span between. This is the conceptual plan for Area 2 included in the Parks Master Plan.
Okay, no playground, just,
Playground. There is a play area taught age. You see, actually, where's my cursor? Right there. So this is a play area taught area that was included in Area 2 in the Parks Master Plan.
okay, thank you.
Pocket park, yeah, exactly.
Okay, as a last comment, I would just ask that there be some outreach to the residents on both sides of this area to let them know that this is what's coming. And I think it's important that we do that because, we tried to do that with the 2 dog parks, and the residents in one area wanted a dog park, and those in another area did not want the dog park, at least at that location. So I just want to make sure that the residents have a understanding that this park would be developed which would certainly impact their, the peace and quiet that they enjoy now. And as long as they're fine with it, then, so be it. Okay, so with that, do we have a motion?
Second.
Okay, please start voting. Okay, motion passes, 4 ayes, 1 recused. Vice Mayor Hannon recusing.
Resolution of the City Council of the City of Newark approving Project List A in the capital improvement plan for the City of Newark for fiscal years 2023 and 2023-24 for final adoption with biennial budget.
Thank you, sir.
All right. So I'm happy to let you know that, oh, thank you. Oh, thank you. See, he brings back snacks. Oh, that's good. I like that.
I found them.
It's like the Snickers, right, commercial. Where was I? Well, I'm happy to report that that was the last of the segmented. So next, we will go over the remaining balance of projects recommended for inclusion with the 2022-2024 CIP. Now, attachment 1 to the staff report provides a list of CIP projects that are currently funded but have not yet been completed. Now, staff acknowledges that there is a large number of projects on this list. However, it should be noted that several of the projects are annual roadway maintenance projects that, by their nature, appear on this list each cycle. In addition, a number of the projects shown have been completed but still have minimum amount of funds remaining due to withholding of retention or because they are in the process of being closed out. The staff also recognizes that there are a significant amount of building maintenance and city facility projects on the list. Staff will soon initiate a multi-department operational evaluation that will hopefully help address the number of projects that have not yet been completed. This could potentially include the addition of a facilities manager position within the Public Works Maintenance Division to oversee maintenance and building facility improvement projects. Now, attachment 2 to the staff report summarizes projects that were previously added to the CIP as unfunded projects. And then we will next go over all projects that were submitted for consideration as part of the CIP budget cycle, along with staff's specific project funding recommendations. Similar to the March 24th overview presentation to facilitate tonight's discussion, all CIP projects submitted for consideration have been separated into different categories based on the nature of the projects and the recommended funding source. So first are gas tax funded projects. As discussed during the March 24th overview presentation, staff anticipates receiving over $4 million per year in gas tax funds, or a total of over $8.4 million over the 2-year CIP. Staff recommends a total of 10 projects for gas tax funding, 6 annual street maintenance projects, and 4 standalone street improvement projects, with a total estimated cost of $8.36 million. Now, although not recommended for funding with gas tax revenue, staff has also identified 2 projects that could be funded with available capital funds. Traditionally, roadway improvement projects within the public right-of-way have been funded exclusively with gas tax funds. However, this does not preclude capital funds from being used towards projects, those projects if needed. Now, later in this presentation, staff will be seeking direction from council on whether those 2 projects should be funded with available capital funds. And lastly, there are 2 projects that were submitted for consideration that are not recommended for funding. Now, detailed descriptions of each of these projects were provided during the March 24th presentation, and tables summarizing staff's funding recommendations are included in tonight's staff report. Staff does have additional slides available detailing the specific funding recommendations should council require additional discussion. Otherwise, I will pause here for any questions on the gas tax project funding recommendations presented here.
Okay, questions? Vice Mayor Hannon?
Thank you, Mayor. When would you anticipate that the street maintenance projects will be identified?
They are already, the list of streets?
Yes.
We already, these are for the overlay, the street maintenance, pavement maintenance project, right? We already have identified that list of streets, and we have a total of 58 different streets on the list, and I would be happy to go over each one of them for you if you want.
That's okay, as long as it's in the packet, that's fine.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But I would like to note that last year, we focused more on our arterials. One of the streets, as you may know, was Thornton Avenue out by the marshlands. That's one of the city's major arterials. With the 2022-2023 pavement maintenance project, we are focusing exclusively on residential neighborhood, local neighborhood streets to kind of balance out our pavement maintenance program. All right, are there any
Other questions? Nobody? Okay.
No?
No, that was it.
Okay. Let me see. Okay, next are capital fund projects. Now, after reconciliation of the Civic Center project and identifying projects previously approved in the CIP that are no longer required, the estimated capital fund balance for the 2022-2024 biannual budget is $4.95 million. Staff recommends setting aside $1 million of capital funds for unexpected project expenses, bringing the available capital fund balance to $3.95 million. Staff recommends a total of 23 projects for funding with capital funds, 8 maintenance projects, 5 new vehicle purchases, 7 operations projects, and 3 previously unfunded projects, with a total estimated cost of $3.28 million. Now, as discussed earlier, staff has identified 2 projects that, although not recommended for funding with gas tax revenue, could be funding with available capital funds. Again, roadway improvement projects within the public right-of-way have traditionally been funded exclusively with gas tax funds. However, again, this does not preclude capital funds from being used towards those projects if needed. The total estimated cost of these 2 projects is $660,000. Now, with $4.95 million of capital funds available, the total $3.28 million of new recommended capital fund projects would leave a capital fund reserve balance of approximately $1.6 million. And again, as discussed earlier, staff recommends setting aside $1 million of the capital fund balance for unexpected project expenses, leaving a balance of approximately $670,000 of capital funds. Now, tonight, again, as mentioned earlier, staff is seeking direction from council on whether those 2 projects should be funded with the anticipated capital fund balance. Now, staff also recommends funding 3 projects with community service facility fees, which are a type of restricted capital funds, in that use of community service facility fees is restricted to the construction of new community service facilities identified in the 2017 Community Service Facilities Development Impact Fee Nexus Study. The total estimated cost of the 3 recommended projects is $490,000. As noted earlier, the projected fund balance of community service facility fees is $854,000. And lastly, there is 1 project that was submitted for consideration that is not recommended for funding. Now, again, detailed descriptions of all these projects were provided during the March 24th presentation, and tables summarizing staff's funding recommendations are again included in tonight's staff report. Staff does have additional slides available, detailing the specific funding recommendations should council require additional discussion. Otherwise, again, I will pause here for any questions on the capital fund recommendations presented here.
Okay, thank you. So again, would anybody in the audience like to speak on this item? Anybody? Okay. City Clerk Harrington, anybody at home?
Actually, we're not, this is not voting yet. If there's no questions from the council on the capital funds, we're going to move on to the next funding source.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Councilmember Bucci, thank you.
Just real quick, and I know we talked about this in March, but this is the second time we've mentioned the 2 projects that could potentially be funded through capital funds. And there's people at home watching and other folks who weren't here in March. So maybe you could touch on those because that funding's come up twice now and we haven't really gone into any detail.
Okay, here, so the table at the top lists the 2 projects that are recommended, that are not recommended for gas tax funding, but are recommended for capital fund or potential capital funding. The first project involves improvements to the landscape medians along some of the city's major arterials, including Maury Avenue, Cherry Street, and Cedar Boulevard. Improvements would include landscape and irrigation improvements, as well as potential replacement of the city's gateway monument signs. Next on the list is another landscape improvement project. This one would specifically address landscape and irrigation improvements within state right-of-way at the Thornton Avenue interchange on Interstate 880. And those are the two projects totaling $660,000 that are not recommended for gas tax funding, but could potentially be funded with capital funds.
Is this still my time?
Pardon me?
Is this still my time?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Is it safe to assume that we could apply, and whether we would probably not get it, but that we could at least come to the state and ask them to fund part of that project since it's in the right of way? And I know it's a Hail Mary, but are we going to reach out?
We're currently actually coincidentally working with Caltrans on the formation of a freeway maintenance agreement, which would formalize and memorialize the maintenance responsibilities for the city of roadways within Caltrans right away. And basically the terms of the agreement is that if all landscape in that area within the city limits would be the responsibility of the city. And that's the standard agreement that they use with each city for the overpasses or the interchange within the state right away. So we could ask. We are currently working with Caltrans, so the question certainly can be approached, but as you kind of alluded to, the likelihood of them reimbursing us for that work is unlikely, if I may garner a guess.
Okay, thank you.
Are we having those same discussions with Caltrans on the 84 Newark Boulevard?
Good question, yes we are. So they're looking to update freeway maintenance agreements for State Route 84 and 880. So it would be each and every freeway interchange and overcrossing, because we do have this, like the Central Avenue overcrossing crosses over, but it's not an interchange. But that would also be included in the freeway maintenance agreement.
Okay. And Vice Mayor Hannon had a question?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I'm happy that the city is negotiating with Caltrans to take over responsibility for maintenance and beautification of these basic entrances into our community. Shame on the state for not maintaining these properties to begin with. We're talking about an agency that has over a $40 billion surplus, yet they continue to maintain blight in our city. It's not like they don't have the staffing. It's not that they can't get the staffing. So we, the city, have to take the responsibility and the expense of maintaining their property. I agree with Councilmember Bucci that we certainly should be seeking reimbursement for any costs that we incur, and hopeful that if we do enter into any negotiation or agreement with Caltran, that there's an agreement that they reimburse us for this. The state has no problem passing mandates to which we're responsible for coming up with the resources and the funding for whatever legislation that they want to pass, but when it comes to maintaining their property, we can't get them to do the least amount of work necessary to keep our state beautiful. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Other comments? No, nobody? Okay.
Okay, if not, next are park impact fee projects. So as presented during the March 24th CIP overview, the city's current balance of park impact fees is approximately $3.6 million. In addition, based on the amount of anticipated residential construction, staff projects an additional $4.3 million of park impact fees over the next 3 years. Now, 2 park improvement projects submitted for consideration are recommended for funding using accumulated park impact fees with a total estimated cost of $150,000. The staff also recommends a total of 8 additional projects from the citywide Parks Master Plan for funding with park impact fees, with a total estimated cost of $3.45 million. And lastly, there is 1 project that was submitted for consideration that is not recommended for funding. Now again, detailed descriptions of all these projects were provided during the March 24th presentation. The table summarizing staff's funding recommendations are included in tonight's staff report. As before, staff does have additional slides available detailing the specific funding recommendations should council require or desire additional discussion. Otherwise, I'll again pause here for any questions on the park impact fee recommendations presented. If that's what you would want to ask. But otherwise, if you have any questions, if not, we'll move on to the next funding source.
Councilmember Bucci?
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm looking at this, and I can't remember if this is the section where we had our discussion about the splash pad or not. It is?
It is.
Can we
Sure, I can
get
pull
into
up that
the
slide.
weeds on that a little bit?
Yep. You want to see the table? I can pull the
I
table
would.
up. Yep. So this table lists the projects from the citywide parks master plan recommended for funding with park impact fees. Would you, if I can go, would you like me to go over each one of these?
We can,
Okay.
and then I can ask my
Okay.
specific question.
So the first project is the reconstruction and installation of the natural grass multi-sport turf fields along the back of Silliman Center, between the synthetic turf fields and baseball fields. This project is the only remaining priority level 1 project in the citywide parks master plan. So next on the list is the installation of sports facilities at Jerry Raber Ash Street Park. So these improvements have been assigned priority level 2 in the citywide parks master plan and include construction of a new volleyball court, bocce ball court, and a multi-sport grass field. And again, I want to clarify, when I say priority level 2, that's the parks master plan's priority level. The parks master plan priority level goes from a priority level 1, which is the most important, to a priority level of 8. So the parks master plan has a scale of 1 to 8, while the CIP has a scale of 1 to 3. The remaining 6 projects make up the balance of what has been termed Phase 2 improvements at the Mel Noons Sports Field Park, with Phase 1 being the recently completed synthetic turf fields and skate park. Now, as discussed at the March 24th presentation, staff proposes to combine the natural turf fields at Mel Noons Sports Field Park with these remaining improvements and refine and develop a comprehensive Phase 2 conceptual plan that could be then constructed once drought conditions approve, completing the planned improvements at Newark's premier community recreational facility. So these Phase 2 improvements would include construction of a restroom, concession stand, playground, splash pad, and group picnic areas, all listed as priority level 3 and 4 projects in the citywide parks master plan.
Okay, so, sorry, is it still my turn?
I wanted to ask a question.
Okay. For a sec, are you done, Mr. Bucci?
I wasn't,
But
Well, let
Yeah, you go.
Councilmember Bucci finish.
we're just being polite.
Thank you. So I contacted staff earlier because when I was looking at this, I did kind of question the wisdom of installing a splash pad. And we currently have a splash pad that is over at Birch Grove Park. You looked it up for me. I think it's been out of commission for approximately 15 to 20 years. And even if we wanted to turn it back on, I was told that when the drought's over, you know, it would still need some work and things to bring it back online. And considering that we haven't even been able to use it for so long because of the drought and the projected drought that we're going to be in for what looks like the next several years, $500,000 on a splash pad it doesn't feel like a good investment for me at this time. So I would actually prefer, and I understand some of the money that's set aside for that is part of the Phase 2 planning and engineering. I would like to see maybe whatever was accounted for that in engineering broken out with other stuff and then pass on the splash pad for a while. Just for $500,000, I think we could probably use some bathrooms in other places and other parks, and that money could be, it's a fair amount of money, and it could be spent better somewhere else. Do you have any information on the splash pad over at Birch that maybe I forgot about?
No, as you indicated, based on what research, it's been out of commission for 15 to 20 years, as you indicated. It is in need of repair. Actually, the park master plan does include renovation of the splash pad at Birch Grove Park in the adopted parks master plan. So the inclusion of these splash pads at these 2 parks were based on community feedback that was garnered and received during the development of the master plan. So there was a reason why there was splash pads identified at these 2 parks. It was based on feedback that was received during the outreach period. So the parks master plan shows a new splash pad at Sportsfield Park. It shows a new splash pad at Birch Grove Park. However, you know, things have changed since the parks master plan had been adopted. If the desires of the community or the council have changed, we can certainly look at revisiting that. Because as you indicated, the first step, if these projects do get approved, would be to do a community outreach, like the mayor indicated we did before developing designs for the dog park. Step one for any of these park projects would be to reach out again to the community and say, this is what the parks master plan developed as a conceptual plan. Do you agree? What do you want to see something different? Do you want a splash pad? Do you want a playground? Do you want 2 playgrounds? And based on that community feedback again, a conceptual master plan would be developed and brought back to council for approval, similar to what was done for the dog parks, the skate park, and the synthetic turf field. So if it's council's desire to remove the splash pad from the phase 2 improvements, we can certainly do that, and we'd be happy to discuss it further tonight.
I think that, you know, if the council agrees, that I would like to possibly see a alternate project that we could fund with this source, and maybe it would be better, you know, talked at the next meeting or whatnot, and then we can make a decision. But I was part of the Parks Master Plan process, and I saw several items on there, everything from a playground for special needs kids to other park accessories and things that just feel like it would be a better investment than this. But that's just one man's opinion. So, but it would be nice to maybe see an alternate for that big ticket item. So, and with that, I will pass my time. Thank you.
Okay. And Councilmember Collazo.
Well, I was going to comment on the splash pad. But Councilmember Bucci beat me to it. But I agree. If we can't water our lawns, we shouldn't have our kids running through a splash pad at the park. An alternate, I mean, we should maybe talk to the community and see how they feel. But, you know, if we're conserving water, we don't know how long this drought's going to last. And, yeah, I think that'd be a good idea. Think of an alternate. Fremont just built a real beautiful playground, and so some kind of a playground that wouldn't use water and the kids could enjoy would be really nice.
Certainly. So, you know, when council, when the recommendation comes up, the recommendation could be to remove splash pad from the recommended list of funded projects. If council has any ideas of what projects you would rather see on this list, we are happy to discuss it tonight. Otherwise, we can always come back during a mid-cycle amendment to the budget and add the project to the budget, because we do, like we said, there is an anticipated, you know, I think it was $3 million of anticipated park impact fees funds over the next 3 years. So, you know, we could have the discussion tonight, or it could be at a later date, but we are available to come back and do a mid-cycle budget to add projects to the CIP.
Okay. Okay, Vice Mayor Hannan.
Just 2 follow-up questions. First, the more generic question, what is a splash pad? I'm envisioning some kind of water amenity where kids run through and water sprays up and gets them, but I have no idea.
Exactly. My son loves it. It's they have like this foamy, you know, little rubber surfacing, and then water comes up through the ground, or they have like water cannons and things that will rain down water on you. Basically, it's a little water park for kids to run around and get wet.
Do you have a list of the park master plan unfunded projects with you this evening that we can take a look at?
It's actually attached to your staff report. So one of the staff report attachments is the priority list of park projects. I don't have a slide for it, but it is one of the attachments to the staff. It's actually attachment 3, citywide parks master plan priority list of projects.
Because you mentioned that we could certainly take a look at that, and if there's a desire of the council maybe to substitute a different park amenity, we could do that, but maybe we're not prepared to make that decision this evening. But I support my colleagues in the sense that maybe we ought to remove this item from the project list, certainly during a drought, because I think it does send the wrong message to the community, and maybe come back with some alternative park amenities that we might want to consider.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, other questions?
Yeah.
Oh, Councilmember Freitas.
Yes, Your Honor, thank you. Mr. Amai, what's the number on this park master plan, items number 5 and number 6, the sports fields park group picnic area 1 and sports field park group picnic area 2? Do you have the shade areas of where those are located?
I do. If I would have to.
It's one by the west end and one by the,
No, they're both by the sport. They're based on the conceptual master plan that's currently in the parks master plan. They're all grouped by the existing softball fields. So that would be the western end of the field of the Silliman Center.
so one it's humongous, looks like versus, number one, it's like 206.
Yeah, one is bigger than the other. And I can pull it up if council
Okay.
would give me a couple minutes to switch it over onto the screen.
Okay, and the last line, so it's a follow-up, it's the Sports Fields Park ground, what is located to? It's by the picnic areas?
Which one was that, Councilman?
The last line, Sports Fields Park playground.
Oh, that's, all of these, the Phase 2 improvements are focused near the existing softball field on the western end. So everything you basically see, except for the grass turf field. So the natural grass fields extend along the back of the Silliman Center,
Okay.
between the synthetic turf fields and the softball fields.
Okay.
But all of these other amenities, the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
So it's
five are near the softball
the
fields.
south of this, okay, the
Yeah.
baseball field.
They're all concentrated currently by the softball field. Now, that doesn't mean that it has to go there. So during, again, the conceptual master plan development of the Phase 2 improvements, the decision could be made that it would be better situated, somewhere else in the park.
And the two picnic areas, one looks like it'll be to serve more people, like the open fields, and the number 2 maybe at the far end.
Yeah, and then again, that's flexible too, because currently the Parks Master Plan shows a larger picnic area, I guess for larger groups, and the second smaller area available. And you can see, it's reflected in the difference of the cost. But again, that could change. It could change to 2 equally sized picnic areas, based on, kind of feedback we get during the
It must be
community
a good
development process.
park playground for $31,000 must be a good one, so, okay.
Playgrounds are not cheap. Yeah, they're not cheap.
thank you, Your Honor. Thank you.
And Councilmember Bucci again?
Thank you. Just a quick follow-up. So would you like us to review the Parks Master Plan and maybe email some suggestions directly? And I assume those would all have to come not as a group email for Brown Act stuff. So I just want to make sure I got some direction on what staff would like us to do on this item. It's a good question. They're whispering.
See, now you get the city attorney involved. Now it's going to cost us money.
Sure. This is what happens when you have 2 attorneys at the dais. 4 or 5 different opinions. I think what would make sense, given the conflict rules, it would make sense to give final direction on what we have here this evening. So that would presumably involve removing the sports field park splash pad. And then at some point after adoption of the CIP, we can certainly bring an amendment. I also do note that we have a Parks Master Plan amendment process through the Community Development Maintenance Fund project. And that certainly can be evaluated at that time as to what other alternatives there are. The list I think is fairly lengthy in the Parks Master Plan, so we can certainly come back and have that discussion. I think there's a fair amount of projects for staff to get going on in the meantime, but I think coming back in a few months after the adoption of this process, adoption of this plan would be an appropriate process to engage in.
Okay, so do you need a motion to remove this item, or?
I think when we get to the final resolution, we can make an amendment in red line text to the resolution at that time.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, there will be one resolution adopting all projects, the remaining projects at once.
One last comment, Mayor.
Okay.
And I do like the city manager's suggestion that we reach back out to the community who helped develop this master plan to begin with and let them weigh in. Since as you mentioned, we have a number of projects we're going to be able to work on to begin with. Let's touch base back with the community. I'd like to let them know what our thought process was, that we were sensitive to the drought situation, and that's why, though they identified this as a priority, council thought it best to maybe wait and see how that drought situation corrects itself. So that would be my recommendation. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, so at this point, anybody in the audience like to speak on this item?
There's one more fund source. Sorry,
Let's not be bashful.
Mr. Mayor, sorry about that. But I would be happy to answer any other questions on park impact fees at this time. If there's none, we are going to be moving on to the last funding source, which is community development maintenance funds. As discussed earlier, community development maintenance funds may be used to pay for feasibility studies or master plans that are related to maintaining and updating the Newark General Plan, zoning ordinance, or other related regulations. The estimated fund balance for community development maintenance funds beginning July 1st, 2022 is approximately $4 million. Now, staff recommends funding 2 studies related to the citywide parks master plan, as City Manager Panoon alluded to, with community development maintenance fund revenue, with a total estimated cost of $500,000. Now, detailed descriptions of these 2 studies were provided during the March 24th presentation and are included in tonight's staff report. Staff does have a slide available detailing the specific recommendations should the council require. Otherwise, I'll again pause here for any questions on the Community Development Maintenance Fund recommendations presented.
Okay, could we see the slide?
We could. Just a second. Here you go. So the first project is a request from the residents at the Sanctuary Village Residential Subdivision at the corner of Cherry Street and Stevenson for the installation of new park improvements at their neighborhood park. The Sanctuary Park was not included in the current Citywide Parks Master Plan. Therefore, development of a conceptual park improvement plan or ranking of those improvements against other projects in the Parks Master Plan never occurred. Therefore, staff proposes funding a project to amend the Citywide Parks Master Plan to add Sanctuary Park, develop a conceptual improvement plan, and perform a prioritization analysis based on recommendations and input from the residents and surrounding communities. If, based on community outreach performed as part of the amendment study, it is determined that current interest levels justify funding of the enhanced improvements at Sanctuary Park, staff anticipates that there will be adequate park impact fee revenue, as we discussed earlier, available to fund the project and add it through the CIP through a mid-cycle amendment of the biennial budget and capital improvement plan. The Citywide Parks Master Plan also identifies a future bike skills park at Birch Grove Park, next to the existing tennis courts, as a priority level 5 project. So again, priority level 5 is the Parks Master Plan. Priority level 3 that you see on the list is the CIP priority level. However, the Parks Master Plan also states that a final location of a BMX park would need to be determined through a future study. The second project listed here would further develop a conceptual plan for a future BMX bike park and perform a location study to determine a preferred location for this facility. And those are the 2 projects that are recommended for funding with community development maintenance funds. So happy to take any questions on these 2 projects at this time.
Okay. Questions, anybody?
Yes.
Okay, Councilmember Collazo?
So Sanctuary Park, that's the park that would be part of the school playground if they ever built the school there.
Correct.
So it's a playground that they want to build, kind of like little jungle gym, something, swings or something, or what's the?
We would have to first reach out to the community or residents of Sanctuary Village and get their idea of what kind of amenities they're looking for. But, that would be in the realm of possibilities, what could be constructed there.
Okay. And the BMX, that would give our kids something to do. That would bring in tax dollars because they would have events. Our hotel rooms would get rented. That sounds good to me. So
Our restaurants would get filled.
our restaurants would be selling food. They'd be shopping in Newark.
You want to recuse yourself again?
No. It's on the other side of town.
I'll follow up if I may, Mayor.
That's it for me right now. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Hannon?
Thank you. If you show the projects once again.
Oh, sure.
By the way, I find it very helpful if you do show the funded projects as you go through your presentation, only because there's so much material to read and so many things to remember. As well, there are some residents that maybe don't watch every council meeting and maybe just checking in for the first time. So it's, the more information we provide our residents, in my opinion, the better.
I have my list with me.
I know you do. The Sanctuary Park, that's going to be a joint park between the school district and the city of Newark. Is that not correct?
That is how it was approved in the Sanctuary Area 3 master plan,
So
specific plan, I'm sorry.
can I anticipate that if and when we develop that park, that the school district will be sharing in the cost for the development, design, and build-out of that park?
No, that's not how it was written in the, good question, but that's not how
Good
it's written in the current development agreement for Area 3.
Better luck getting money from the state.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, there was something about a turnip. Yeah, I see the design and location of the play areas, I guess, for the sanctuary park being more on the south end of that park, which should not interfere with the school district property if they want to expand into that park, and we want to let them do that, then, I don't see a conflict there. I don't see a joint use of the facilities, of the play apparatus facilities. I think they're going to be standalone. The school district may decide to build on the north end of that, additional play apparatus for the students, but the residents' play apparatus, I think, would be on the south side and be open to our community.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions, comments? Okay, do you have anything else, Jason?
Yeah, well, moving
I
on
thought
to
you did.
next steps. We're getting close. On May 26th, the draft biennial budget will be presented to City Council during a work session. In June, staff will present the draft CIP document to the Planning Commission for conformance with the general plan. And finally, we will present the completed biennial budget and CIP document for adoption by the City Council on June 23rd. So with that, staff recommends that City Council approve the balance of projects discussed here for inclusion in the 2022-2024 CIP as a whole and as amended as we discussed, for final adoption with the 2022-2024 biannual budget. Project list A through D have already been approved and are not included in this recommendation. Also, as discussed earlier, staff is seeking direction from council on whether the two projects which are not being recommended for funding with gas tax revenue, that's the median, landscape median project and the landscape project at the Thornton Avenue interchange, whether they should instead be funded with anticipated capital fund balance. Now, that concludes staff presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any additional questions at this time.
Okay, so at this, let me just ask, we have an email here from Mr. Saxena on the situation at, in their development, the park that's in their development. And I know this can't be a part of the current process that we're doing, but where does this fit in the overall scheme of things as far as looking at the issue that's been raised here?
Sure. Staff would be more than happy to take a look at this. I do caution that extensive amount of consideration was given to that particular development condition when this project was entitled several years ago. It involved a lot of coordination, collaboration between various attorneys and the developer and city staff. We proceeded very cautiously in that regard. Having said that, nonetheless, staff would be more than happy to take a look at this and see if there's any possibility for installation of potential projects that would not adversely impact the city or put us in some sort of precarious liability situation. So happy to do that analysis and take a look at it further.
Okay, all right. Thank you. So with that, would anybody in the audience like to speak on any of the items that were brought up on this part of the agenda, project list A? Anybody? Okay, City Clerk Harrington, are there any,
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
Namat Saxena is online.
oh, how about that? Okay.
Namit, you're unmuted. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, City Clerk. Thank you, Mayor Nagy.
Namit, you're very faint in volume.
You must be using Comcast internet.
I heard a laugh.
Is this slightly better?
Much better.
Okay. Apologies for that. So actually, I really appreciate Mayor Nagy bringing that email and that topic. So I won't use the 5 minutes to go over that because City Manager Benjamin actually, gave me a response that I was hoping that the city would consider pursuing that. So I'll use these 5 minutes to actually comment on the point that Councilman Bucci made about the and looking at alternatives for instead of looking at different alternatives, things like the additional bathrooms in different parks would be something that community members like ourselves would appreciate because we don't have as many parks with bathroom facilities. Another potential idea is a lot of the existing playgrounds have mulched. Instead of mulch, maybe have in-foam rubber, which is better for our kids to play in. Those ideas are more conducive, spending of city's money instead of splash pad. Maybe when the council members come back with ideas, those are things that we can consider.
Okay.
So that was the only comment I want to make tonight, and I appreciate
Okay, thank you, sir.
coming back on the Academy Park topic conversation.
Okay. That's the only one online?
That's the only one, sir.
Okay. Okay. So any further council comments? Assume you're ready to vote. Will somebody make a motion?
We do need to first, as a reminder, discuss earlier, we're seeking direction, and I'll pull up the slide to remember. It's these two projects right here at the top table, whether these two projects are currently not recommended for gas tax funding, but they have been identified for potential funding with capital funds. And again, these projects like this are traditionally funded with gas tax projects, but they could be funded with capital funds if council so desires. So we are looking for direction from council on whether these two projects should be included in the CIP list as funded projects with capital funds.
Okay. I would suggest gas tax funds.
We don't have enough gas tax funds to fund the $660,000 anticipated cost.
Oh.
And that's why they're not recommended for funding, but there is $660,000 available in the anticipated capital fund balance that could be used for these two projects, and that's why we identified them for possible or potential capital funds. If we wanted to use gas tax funds, we would have to reduce funding from any of one or more of the projects already recommended for funding.
Okay. Sure.
The gas tax revenue that you advised us at the beginning of the meeting is about $8.43 million over the next, is that over the next 2 years? Is that 21, 22, 22? Tell me what.
22, 23, and 23, 24.
Okay. So I agree with Mayor, it certainly would be best to use the gas tax. I know you gave that some thought. Would it be, is it imperative that we do these projects now, or could these wait for the next allocation of funding from the gas tax?
It's not imperative that you do it now. It could wait for additional funding. But as staff pointed out, there is a capital fund balance, and, the timer went off. Sorry, I will have to stop my comments now. I am sorry. Where was I? As I said, they're traditionally we use gas tax funds to fund projects within the public right-of-way. However, it doesn't preclude those projects from being funded with you can use capital funds with them. It's just that the amount of projects that are recommended for funding would exhaust anticipated funding over the next 2 fiscal years. So these projects were not recommended for funding.
Okay, Mayor, I'm happy to go ahead and make a motion unless any of my colleagues would prefer to make the motion.
Okay, we have Councilmember Bucci, I think.
And I'm
wanna make a
certainly,
comment first.
certainly taking into consideration your request on the splash pad.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Vice Mayor. I think we're going to have a complicated motion here. I guess I just have a question as far as the Caltrans right-of-way and landscaping. If we don't fund this, I mean, is it safe to assume the state isn't going to do anything with it for the next 2 years, and it's going to, either continue to collect, or we're going to continue to have issues? And I suppose if we're in negotiations for some sort of right-of-way contract we would obviously then be able to go in and do some cleanup and things, but what's the situation right now? I mean, can we go out there and do any of that work, or?
We could, but we would again have to pay for it, and it would require a Caltrans encroachment permit to do it. But right now, I believe, and
It's a free permit.
Nope.
it is not a free permit.
No.
We do get charged to go into the right of way and clean it up. But
They charge you to clean up their mess. The Vice Mayor's head's going to explode. Have we, when things have been bad, I know we've had to do some abatement and things out there, so we have spent some time cleaning things. I guess I'm just trying to learn more about that. Is this going to save us money in the long run? Why is this a better option than what we're currently doing, I guess?
yeah, and this wouldn't be just cleaning up and abatement and removing the blight. It would be redoing the landscape, basically, to help deter any of the littering and, loitering, I guess you could say, in that area. So it would be improving the landscaping beyond what Caltrans standards are, which are pretty minimal in that area. So that's the main focus of the project, including cleaning up what's existing there. But it would be cleaning up and then improving the landscaping in that area.
Does that include removing any housing that's there?
That would be part of the cleanup. But there's regulations tied to that that we would seek legal counsel on what we do.
There's a lot of layers to it. That's another layer.
Yes.
I guess I would ask the council to consider maybe breaking that out and actually funding that with some of our capital funds money and holding off on the median upgrades until more gas tax money became available. I don't want to mix up our motions here, but I guess I could start by making a motion to include the $200,000 of for the Caltrans right-of-way funding of capital funds projects, and to also strike the splash pad from the funded projects, and to accept the rest of the CIP as recommended. And then we could vote that up or down.
I just want to make sure, Mayor, I understand the motion. So it sounds like, Mr. Bucci, what you're suggesting is that the $200,000 for the cleanup, that $200,000 not be, that be funded through the capital funds, or not be funded through the capital funds?
That would be funded through capital funds.
And that the arterial landscape median upgrades, we hold off until additional gas tax become available to do that work?
Correct.
And then remove the splash pad?
And then strike the splash pad. And
I'll second that motion, Mayor.
Okay. I assume we're ready to vote? Okay, motion passes, 5 ayes.
Resolution of the City Council of the City of Newark approving inclusion of projects in the capital improvement plan for the City of Newark for fiscal years 2022-23 and 2023-24 for final adoption of the biennial budget.
Okay. That completes all of the items we had on tonight's agenda. So with that, we are adjourned.